Hey everyone, welcome back. And today I want to be talking to you about some of my adventures or maybe misadventures in dentistry. I think all of us dentists have quite a few stories that we could tell, and sometimes we're a little too embarrassed at the time to tell them, but often in hindsight, they make for very good storytelling. And so if you'd like to hear more about that, then stay tuned. So the first story is about a patient that was coming in for a implant retained, like a bridge that is sort of supported by implants. So that's sort of what we call a screw retained implant supported bridge, and there's multiple teeth, and there's usually only like 4 implants or 6 implants. So this was her upper arch. She was coming in for the try-in. Luckily it was not the final delivery, it was the try-in, and so we were just making sure that everything was going to be right, and we had done it in wax, and it was still just making sure everything was good, but we have to screw in every little part of it. So there were 4 areas that I had to use screws, and I had taken them and put the appliance and the screws, which had stayed inside the bridge, in a little bit of like a disinfectant solution. And so I had taken it out of the patient's mouth, and I had put it in a little cup with the screws in there, and I said to my assistant, and she wasn't as experienced with this kind of thing, so I just said, can you go rinse the appliance off for me, and then we'll try it back in. So I take it from her, we put it in, she brings it back, we put it in the mouth, and I take my little driver. It's sort of like a little mini screwdriver, and so we take the driver and we put it, start trying to tighten down each screw, and geez, it's not working. What the heck? Okay, try it again. I try it again. And this is why, it didn't occur to me at first to look what was going on, but so I finally take it off. I'm like, oh, what is going on? The screws don't seem to be working. So I look inside the appliance, and in fact, there are no screws. So of course it wasn't going to go in very well because the screws were no longer there. So of course, naturally, I would look at the cup and like, oh, okay, they're not in the cup. So sort of usually I can keep things to myself, and I can subtly say to my assistant, okay, can you check on this or whatever. But I just blurted out, where are the screws that were with this? And my assistant, she was like, screws? What screws? So we knew we had a problem because we were going to need these screws, and I didn't have any extras. And this is something, you always, at least you can learn from these mistakes, right? So now I have extra screws in the office. But she thought, oh my God, I just took it into this special sink, and there was like no real protective drain there. So, but she thought that maybe when she rinsed it out that the screws had went down the drain. So we had to admit to the patient, luckily the patient was very understanding, but so it was in this sink that had this like very special S-turn, and I was like, oh my God, my dad's close by. So of course, what do you not do when you in an emergency? You always call your dad, right? So I called my dad. He took the whole sink apart, and did he find, I call them the world's tiniest screws. They're actually little tiny screws, and you would not believe how much strength and power and importance these little screws have. But anyway, he found them. They found all 4 of them in the drain. Now, of course, they had to go through sterilization, so the patient just sort of sat there. We did spend a lot more time working with that case that day. But I did learn a couple of things. Is, communicate very well when there's tiny little bits and parts that your assistant might need to be aware of, and have extra parts on hand when you do lose those parts, because it's not if, it's when. This is also sort of an implant case story, and what happened was the patient was coming in, and we were going to do, again, it was like a type of try-in that we were going to do, and I had not checked the case beforehand. So again, as a dentist, if I can give you any tips, it's to check all cases, lab cases, before they come in, test drive them, use different materials, take them on and off the model. Make sure you've looked at all the cases before the patient comes in. Sometimes we get really busy as dentists and we don't get a chance to do that. And this was just that exact example where I had not really looked at the case closely because I thought I had it figured out, and I trusted the lab and it was going to be fine, right? So anyway, so she gets in here, and I realize I can't get the prosthetic off the model. I don't have, it's a very special, different type of thing that the lab had done, and I could not get the appliance off the model. So when the patient came in, and of course she's an elderly lady, it's like it's her time, it's, you know, inconvenient for her to get here, I basically had to create another reason why she was here. And in the end, it actually turned out really good, and we kind of made a wonderful experience for her. But instead of, you know, just saying, oh, like, call her or like tell her to come back another day, we brought her in and we took the time to really, you know, share with her and talk about what she was going to want with her smile and really dive deeper into the aesthetics. So it actually worked out in my favor, but it came down to just feeling completely unprepared and having a situation where sometimes you don't really want to let on to the patient that you really messed up. I mean, often we do, we often tell them, but in some cases you just have to wing it, and you just have to go with, you know, what you can come up with at the time to make the situation seem like it was worthwhile for the patient. So that was my lesson for that one. This was something that happened to my dental assistant before she even came to me as a dental assistant. And she was for a long time a surgical dental assistant. So a lot of the surgeries, a lot of the things that they were doing on patients were, the patient was heavily sedated. So anyway, so this one day they were doing a major surgery, and she talks about this story all the time, so I have to tell it even though it's not my story. And so the patient was sedated, they're doing the procedure, and when she turned to, like, you know, get something for the doctor, her suction accidentally kind of grazed the patient's hair, and it literally sucked the toupee right off the patient's head. So her panic, and the dentist she was working for at the time was a little bit more serious than me. I mean, I would have cracked up. There's no way around it. I would have probably, maybe I'm just not that professional, but I would have had to have laughed at this. And she said she tried to get the suction away from the toupee, and she couldn't, and now the patient's bald, or has, you know, very little hair, and so she had to shut down the entire suction system in order to get the toupee. And her eyes when she's telling this story, I tried to get her on this video so she could tell it, because it's way more funny when she tells it. And so she was, you know, realizing that she was probably in trouble, so she had to shut down the suction, she had to take the toupee, fix it, and like kind of smooth it out over the patient's head. Patient never even knew. Patient was, again, sedated, so it was all good, but it just made her really aware and cautious of what we're doing with some of our tools. And like I said, the suctions that we use for some of our evacuation systems are really, really powerful. So, you know, we suck up lips, cheeks, tongues, rubber dams. Sometimes people will close their lips on a suction, and I always joke, I'm like, we can take out a lot more than spit with that. It's very, very powerful. So to have it pull an entire toupee off and have to shut down the system is just sort of one of my favorite memories. But one last story I have to tell you. When I was in dental school, the dental school I went to is Dalhousie Dentistry, and it is in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And our prosthodontist, he also has a YouTube channel, by the way, who's Dr. Loney. He does what every year for the third year dental students, he does the Prosthodontic Olympics. And so he had every group, so there were 4 or 5 different groups in the class, and we each had to be really good at something, practice it. So mine was a crown prep, and there were probably, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 of us doing crown preps. There were so many of us doing impressions, and there were different things going on. So at the height, the most exciting part of the Prosthodontic Olympics is the finale, where the people who are doing the crown preps, because that's sort of one of the coolest procedures to be tested on, we were doing that. Now, this is in the basement of Dalhousie Dentistry, and there are like cubicles where a lot of dental students can kind of stand up over and look down into the cubicle, down into the operatory. And so I remember being surrounded by dental students, like surrounded in every way. I was the last person left, who all the others had handed in their crown preps, and they had failed, by the way, because their crown prep was just not acceptable, or they had just, I don't know, failed for some reason. So I had gotten word of this, that I was the last man standing and I could maybe pull this off. So they were cheering me on. It was just like, it was a moment. It was sort of like being at the end of a road race, and you know, you've got all the people at the end cheering you on. And so I was like, I got this, I got this. And so as a dental student, you know, you're really concentrating, you're not thinking about what's around you. And I tell you now, today, I always check. But I had the dental light down by my head, so like so close to my head. I got up with such, like I could hear Chariots of Fire, like the song Chariots of Fire in my head. And I was gonna like take that crown, take that dentiform out of that, the teeth out of that dentiform's mouth, and triumphantly go up to my professor and hand them the crown prep of my career. Like, I really thought I did a great job. But that never happened. No. The light, which is like steel, like these heavy lights, our lights now aren't like that. I got up and my head cracked into this light so bad, I literally was knocked backwards, and literally there were moments where I don't remember. I know I was knocked unconscious in front of the entire dental school. Like, you don't even know. I mean, we're talking about embarrassing. I'm sure anybody who was there remembers it because it was sick. And so somebody else had to take my crown prep up to the judges because I was half unconscious. I was coming to, and there was a time limit on this. So you had to get it up to the judges in so much time. So it wasn't just quality, it was quantity of, how much time. So we get it up there and they're like looking at it, and these prosthodontists, and they're really like fussy. It's like, nope, failed. So those are my stories for now. If you want to hear more, I will actually start to document them because I guarantee you about every week something crazy happens in my clinic, and there's always lessons to be learned. So maybe I should be sharing some of these things with you more often. So if you'd like to hear more about that, or you'd like to leave me a comment, or you have a funny story, please leave me a comment or like and subscribe. And until then, I will see you next time.